Welcome everyone to our Meet the Producers webinar for FairWild Certified Licorice. It's great to have so many people here today. We will be going over a few different things in the webinar today. Just to say, this is the latest in our series of webinars. We've had some already on covering just what an introduction to what FairWild is. We've had some aimed at brands, explaining how they can source FairWild certified ingredients and what the use of the label means. We've had one aimed at operators, really explaining in detail what the FairWild standard is and how they can work towards implementing it in their organization. And those are all recorded and available on our website. But with this one, we wanted to really focus on a specific species, a specific ingredient, and the producers that are certified for that ingredient. And as licorice is one of the #1 FairWild traded FairWild certified species by volume, and one of the earliest certified species, we wanted to start with licorice. Right, so what are we actually going to be covering today in detail? So first of all, we're going to look at risks and opportunities in licorice supply chains. So Caitlin Schindler from Traffic's Wild at Home project will be talking us through that, and also an introduction for sort of why we should be thinking about wild plants sourcing generally as well. Then we're going to take a more detailed look at licorice from one of the key sourcing countries, so Kazakhstan. And Elise Hell from Traffic will be giving us an intro to that. Then I'll explain a bit about what a FairWild certified producer is. So I realized I didn't introduce myself. So I'm Emily King. I'm the Business Engagement Officer for the FairWild Foundation. So I'll explain a bit about what FairWild certification is and what it means, and some aspects of the FairWild standard, so that you can really get a sense of what it means to be a FairWild certified producer. Then we will actually meet, well, electronically meet some of the FairWild certified licorice producers. So some of them have sent in videos. We will also hear from some of the registered traders of these ingredients, so that you can get a sense for what the FairWild certified businesses are like. And then we will finish up with a few points on how businesses can actually then go about sourcing FairWild licorice and other ingredients, if that is of interest. And then we'll have a short amount of time for going over any questions. So before I hand over to Caitlin, I'd just like to introduce her. So Caitlin is the project manager for the Wild at Home project for Traffic, as I mentioned. So before joining Traffic, Caitlin worked in sustainability and human rights and a variety of commercial supply chains, including seafood, timber, farming, and she now applies this experience to wild plant ingredients. So she's going to give us a bit more background on that project and tell us more about wild licorice supply chains, risks and opportunities. So over to you, Caitlin.
Thanks very much, Emily. So great introduction. Yeah, so I'm Caitlin. I'm the project manager for this Wild at Home project. So I'm going to kick off with a bit of a general background on wild plants, which will lead into an introduction on the Wild at Home project. And from that, we'll move into some of the findings from the project on licorice. So wild plant ingredients, many of us will know, they can be found absolutely everywhere, but they do tend to go unnoticed. Some of our everyday products that can contain wild plant ingredients include medicines, teas, soft drinks, cosmetics, hair products, perfumes. They're all over the place, but often hidden on ingredient lists and under strange names sometimes as well on those ingredient lists. Licorice is, of course, one of those wild ingredients. Some other potentially familiar ones are shea butter in lotions and chocolate, gum arabic in soda and in frozen treats, and Brazil nuts in snacks. And these ingredients are on a fairly grand scale. So there's an estimated 3,000 species with medicinal or aromatic use, which are traded on an international scale. And over half of those species are estimated to be wild collected. However, the impacts of wild harvest are not often considered or evaluated. So only about 1/5 of medicinal and aromatic plant species have had their threat status assessed. So with 80% not yet assessed, how can we be sure that what we're taking from these ecosystems and these plants is sustainable? And this lack of data becomes a critical issue when we start to consider the scale and trends of trade. So international trade in medicinal and aromatic plants has increased more than 75% in value over the past 2 decades, and that's after inflation adjustments. And an additional accelerated increase is expected over the last year or two in medicinal plants, especially due to their use in natural COVID-19 treatments and remedies. I'm really sorry, my dog is whimpering in the background if anyone's hearing some strange noises. So from those facts, we can start to understand the massive pressures that wild plant ingredients are facing and kind of lead into the Wild at Home project. So wild harvested ingredients also share many similar opportunities and risks at the producer level. So these species often play a key role in the ecosystems that they're a part of. And one of the opportunities is that they can be a focal point for wildlife conservation projects. However, without this awareness, species might be overharvested, or they might be threatened due to other pressures like land use changes, or also with COP26 going on at the moment, and some can be threatened by climate change, for example. And importantly, we mustn't forget about the critical role that the harvesters themselves play, and equally the cultural role that these species can play in those harvesters' lives. But in complex global supply chains, it's easy for this fact to be obscured. It is possible that harvesters might experience access rights issues or gender-related issues, such as women not being permitted to own or manage land in certain countries. Harvesters might also receive low or unstable pay rates for the harvesting work that they do. So in response to all of those facts, risks, and opportunities, FairWild was developed to show what best practice can look like in wild plant harvesting. However, many businesses are not yet ready to make that leap to certification. It might be that they simply aren't aware that they're trading in wild ingredients. It might be that information about wild ingredients is not readily available to them. Or it might just be that they don't feel pressure from their buyers or their shareholders to address these risks. So the Wild at Home project kind of takes a step back from certification, and it aims to provide some of those tools to get a broader audience aware of and engaged with wild plant ingredients. So we're doing this by creating an information platform on wild plant ingredients, which is called Wild Check, and then using that platform to engage with industry and consumers while continuing to support FairWild's development. So there are a huge number of species, medicinal aromatic plant species in international trade, and it can be overwhelming for a business to start if they're just starting to look at these types of ingredients. So Traffic has produced this list of what we're calling the Wild Dozen to help narrow the focus as businesses begin their pathway to responsible sourcing. And these 12 species were selected to act as flagships for wild plants. So just like we have, pandas, elephants, and pangolins in wildlife conservation, these species are representative of the types of risks and opportunities that can face all wild plant ingredients. So we have some resources coming soon that will help businesses take their first step around these Wild Dozen species. We're creating some risk and opportunity profiles on each of the Wild Dozen species. And so each of these will include a social and ecological risk assessment and responsible sourcing opportunities. And these will be freely available for consumers and businesses in early 2022. And importantly for today, you'll notice that licorice is on the list. So licorice is one of the 12 species that we are focusing on. So now I'm going to move into some of the information from the licorice profile. So starting with the real basics, licorice is it's plants from the Glycyrrhiza family, and they are perennial herbs that are mostly wild collected. However, they can also be cultivated. They're primarily harvested for their roots and rhizomes, and that's where that glycyrrhizin compound is found, that super sweet kind of characteristic licorice taste. Some of the leading wild producers are listed there. And just thinking about the most common uses of licorice as well. So it's thought that the tobacco industry is actually one of the biggest users of licorice as a taste or flavor additive in tobacco products. It's also fairly common in medicine, and especially in some traditional systems such as traditional Chinese medicine. A lot of us will be familiar with licorice from food, so finding it in candy. It's also often in beverages and also teas. It can also be found in cosmetics. So looking on a very broad scale, so licorice has quite a wide range. However, if we were to generalize across its whole range, harvesting is conducted seasonally and typically on a rotation of 3 to 5 years. However, this can vary depending on the specific conditions of the harvesting location. The roots might be dug by hand or in maybe some more larger or more industrialized operations, sometimes using a tractor. The harvesters can vary quite a bit depending on the country that you are looking at, and actually social data is somewhat hard to come by, but typically, again, to generalize, they can often be from rural or remote communities. The processing of licorice typically occurs in China, Iran, and Europe. So you can start to see from that how supply chains can become kind of complex and obscure the actual sourcing location or the original harvesting location. And to put some kind of dollar values around it, so exports between 2009 and 2018 were valued over 1.7 billion US dollars. And there's an additional expected spike in demand from 2020, so due to its use in natural COVID-19 treatments. So licorice is one of those wild dozen species which has really seen a growth in popularity because of COVID-19. Okay, so moving on to the specific risks that we identified through the licorice profile. So first of all, although I mentioned that licorice has quite a wide range, it's hard to generalize across the whole range. Generally, it is doing well, but there are some local threats and declines to be aware of depending on where you're sourcing. So for example, there is some land conversion in China, and one of the threats in Kazakhstan, for example, is destructive harvesting practices. My colleague Elise is going to go into a bit more detail on that afterwards. There is a risk of loss of traditional harvesting knowledge, and that's as a result of rural-urban migration. So we see these kind of broader trends all over the world. Again, I mentioned that the harvest is typically done by remote, rural, and also low-income communities, and these tend to be at a higher risk of being exploited because of these characteristics. There are also some significant country-level risks in some of the top producing countries to be aware of. So these ones are not specifically related to licorice harvesting. However, if you're purchasing from specific countries, it's important to be aware of the broader labor context in those countries. So for example, some of the issues can be high modern slavery rates, high levels of corruption, child labor in similar agricultural commodities, and in some cases, workers are denied their rights to freedom of association and collective bargaining. So yeah, important to be aware of as you're sourcing from specific countries, and there will be more details on that in the licorice profile when it is published. So finally, coming on to the opportunities. So through the Wild at Home project and the Wild Check platform, we really want to emphasize that there are lots of great opportunities around wild harvested plants. It's not that we want to push sourcing away from them, it's that we want to make people aware of the risks, but then also help people to take advantage of some of the great opportunities around them. So specific to licorice, the first one is soil restoration. So licorice is a salt tolerant and a nitrogen fixing plant, so it can be a great tool for soil restoration in areas where that is needed. Again, coming back to these the rural livelihoods, so through purchasing wild harvested licorice, you can support rural livelihoods and also retaining traditional knowledge in places where it is important for sustainable harvest. Through the responsible purchasing of licorice, you can also have the opportunity to support local initiatives like producer unions and cooperatives, and through that can flow other opportunities like ensuring fair wages. Improving traceability is a great one. So I mentioned that licorice supply chains in particular can be quite complex. So improving traceability also increases security for your business and is something that you can kind of promote in your communications. And of course, there's always the option to pursue certification and pursue best practice. Especially with licorice, FairWild is a good one to talk about. So licorice is one of the first products to be FairWild certified, and we'll meet some of those great producers later today. So I'm going to leave it there for now. At the very end of our time together, I'll come back to some next steps if anyone was interested in more information on the Wild at Home project. But otherwise, I will pass back to Emily for now.
Great, thank you, Caitlin. So that was a really nice sort of grounding us in what licorice is, what its applications are, and also some of the specific points that we really need to think about in terms of sourcing licorice from the different countries. But now we're going to hear from Elise Harrell. So she manages a number of licorice-based projects at Traffic. Before joining Traffic, she promoted sustainable use of forests, working with companies for better practices in the tropical timber sector. And now she applies that experience to diverse projects around sustainable trade, especially licorice. So she's going to give us a bit more background on a project that's been running for a number of years on licorice in Kazakhstan. And we're really going to take a deep dive into what licorice supply and sourcing looks like from that country. So I'll hand over to you, Elise.
Thanks a lot, Emily, for the introduction, and Caitlin for the presentation. So as Emily just said, I will go into a bit more details on the supply chain of the licorice from Kazakhstan. The project is now finishing the 2 first years. It was under the funding of the KNCF. We are working on a follow-up, so we hope to continue this work with the same stakeholders and going further with local harvester in the next years. The aim of the project was to improve the sustainability of the supply chain, so from the harvester to the trade, with the first part being really reviewing all the information, trying to understand how this supply chain is organized, and also trying to connect with the stakeholders, so government agencies and harvester businesses. And at the end, we produced a report, Sweet Dreams. You have the cover here, and I will send you the link in the chat later. This report was the occasion for us to build some recommendation, and we also worked on trying to work on this recommendation directly with the stakeholders involved, and we hope also in the future to continue that work. In Kazakhstan, there is the 2 main species of licorice. It's one of the most important medicinal plant for Kazakhstan, not only in terms of resource, but most trade value. It's mostly harvested to go on the exports. It's the roots that are exported. You can see in here that there is interest for licorice since quite a while in Kazakhstan, and you can also note that there is a really high diminution, decrease in the resource of licorice between the 70s and the 90s. But that 20 years was enough for the licorice to recover, and it really showed that proper management, and if we support sustainable practices, they can really be a sustainable trade of this commodity. And it's after I just want to quickly show you the trade data. So the question is, what is traded and to go where? So the raw roots are the main product, but the second is the extract. But in the database for the trade, the reported code for the licorice roots is not only for the licorice, it's also with other commodities. So we cannot have a clear vision of the exports, and nationally there is no access to data. Even if there is export permits, not everything is transparent. So this is one of the gaps we identified in this research. But for the extract, we can see that China, US, and France are the 3 main buyers. But we also know that China is the main buyer at the moment for the roots. If we go to the harvester, it really follows what Caitlin said about harvester involved in the wild harvesting of wild plant worldwide and for the other commodities. So low-income people, rural area, which leads often to over-harvesting because it's often one of the main source of income for the communities. There is also it's also important to point that this is quite a hard job. So there is often low access to electricity and water during the harvesting period. It can be for several days in the field because it's really remote. So it's also important that FairWild, for example, brings support to this to the harvester to have better working condition. And we can also see that there is a gender unbalance, gender repartition in the worker. And it's also important to have a look at the legislation, so to see what are the permits and how it's implemented. At the moment, there is the biological certification. This is needed, but sadly, this is not really this is in place on the paper, but in reality, the implementation of this requirement is only possible in the state-owned land, which really limits the efficiency of this regulation. And there is also a lot of informal collection, and some people with permits will buy from harvesters that are not registered, and also they will often go over the limit of the volume they should harvest according to the permits. So this is for us one of the risks. I will go back to it, but it's also something that is can be easily changed and easily improved for a better supply chain. I will continue on talking about the practices. So is also an example to show that good practices are known and clearly identified. The Institute of Ethnobotany, who did this study on the practices, is the institution who is in charge of the permits. So they have a clear vision of how to make this harvesting sustainable with like a long rotation for the regeneration, leaving some part of the roots so it can continue to grow, and also limit the deepness of the depth, of the work in the soil. It's also important to say that the main thing happening in terms of unsustainable practices that is often that the harvest are happening too often. So they don't respect this 4 or 6 years, but they often go for more like 2 years, which is the problem at the moment. If I follow also the idea of like risk and opportunities, we can identify some threat at the moment for the licorice in Kazakhstan. So this for the moment the regulation is not strong enough to really have a transparent supply chain, and there is also this lack of implementation of the regulation of enforcement. So there is over harvesting, and it leads to destruction of the soil, which also leads to the lack of incomes for the people. So because some agricultural land can be destroyed, and also the resources are not going to be regenerating fast enough for the communities to get a proper income. So this is the main threat, but there is also opportunities because there is new regulations that should be put in place by the end of the year. There is also quite strong concern by local association and stakeholders. So there is the potential for change, and also there is good example of sustainable practices in Kazakhstan with the FairWild company already in the country. So the elements for change are there. Yeah, one of the opportunity for us is the FairWild standard. So we use it to present to the harvesters what can be the first step for sustainability, so risk assessment and having a transparent practices. Yeah, the recommendation is just quickly part of our report is just to explain a bit in one page that it's really a common work. So the government need to improve the data collection and the regulation. Private sector need to improve the practices, and the NGO need to support the good actors and also bring the knowledge and on the best practices, and on the regulation side on monitoring and collaborate better to really actively improve the current situation where there is gaps for what we could see. So yeah, just the last slide is just to present you the FairWild implementation in Kazakhstan. It was for us a really great tool to talk about sustainability, having a local example and also having local stakeholders familiar with with the standard was really a great tool, but not only to really talk about certification, but to use that as a framework for discussion and for the practices. But Emily will present you a bit more in details the different aspects of FairWild.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Elise. I think it's really helpful to have that country-specific understanding and insight into what licorice supply chains can look like and some of the specific issues that need to be taken into consideration. But we've now had FairWild mentioned a few times, and in case there's anyone that isn't maybe familiar with FairWild in detail or would like to just understand a bit more what it actually means to be a FairWild certified collection operation, I'm going to give a brief introduction now. So firstly, what is FairWild? So FairWild is a sustainability standard with third-party audited certification, and it covers wild harvested plants, fungi, and lichen. So it was produced or sort of first established over a decade ago, and at the time was really the only standard that was focusing specifically on these types of ingredients and these taxa. So there were a number of other fair trade standards at the time, but they were mainly focused or solely focused on cultivation and agriculture. So the standard combines both fair trade principles with ecological sustainability. So it's looking at both, respect for harvesters and collectors and recognition of the fact that often they are marginalized or sort of rural people who are reliant on this as a source of income, as both Elise and Caitlin have mentioned, whilst also recognizing there are potential threats to the species being harvested and also the habitats they exist in. So to try and provide assurance or to provide assurance for companies purchasing these ingredients that if it's FairWild certified, they have been harvested and traded in accordance with these principles. And the standard is applicable globally. So again, that was unique at the time of inception as well, in that it can be applied really in any country in the world. So for example, we currently have certified businesses in Spain, in Zimbabwe, in El Salvador. There are some in Eastern Europe. And that's part of the real beauty, I think, of the FairWild standard, is that it is designed and written to take account of the unique situation for wild harvesting compared to cultivation. But it's not so prescriptive that it can't recognize that each different supply chain, each different ingredient or source country will have its own specific characteristics. So potentially different sources or different history of traditional use or different types of ingredients being sourced. And what is actually in the standard is grouped around a number of different principles. So just to say as well, the standard is freely available online. It's on our website in English and a number of other languages. And it is designed to be used not just as a route to certification, but also as a best practice guide for harvesting and trade. So there are principles that are grouped around the environmental sustainability. So that's looking at how companies can ensure that the species and wild plant resource itself is maintained. So that's things such as having a resource assessment, a management plan, and so on, whilst also looking at the wider habitat that the species and harvesting will occur in, so preventing negative impacts to that wider habitat. There's also a number of principles around the social and fair trade side of things. So looking at the impact on collectors and also workers, so fair contractual relationships, health and safety, sort of recognition of benefits for collectors and communities, so both financial and others. And in terms of financial, that's things such as a minimum pricing paid and also payment of a specific FairWild premium. So that's not paid to individual collectors, that's paid into a premium fund that's kept separate. And then the use of that fund is determined in a process which collectors feed into, and it's supposed to be spent for things that are of benefit to the wider community. So that might be something such as, I mean, it really can be determined by the collection operation themselves. We do have some guidance, but some examples might be one collection operation decided that as they were very remote and they didn't have access to a permanent dental care, they would pay for a traveling dentist to go around all the communities. Or it might be that some collection operations have used it to pay for school supplies for their rural schools so that the local children could that. So there's lots of really nice examples, but it's sort of up to them to determine what makes sense for their community and situation. We also have some principles that look around the legal and ethical requirements. That's not just formalized laws or regulations and international agreements, but also more informal or traditional customary rights and access, and also recognizing the Nagoya Protocol and access and benefit sharing concepts. And then we have some others as well that are looking more at the management and business side of the operation. So responsible management practices, business practices, and also promoting long-term and transparent trading relationships between the certified business and the first buyer of them. So businesses that are FairWild certified will be subject to an annual audit by a third-party control body. So currently there are 4 control bodies that are accredited to carry out FairWild audits, listed on the bottom there and also on our website. And these can carry out audits anywhere in the world. The one restriction is that CSCA on the bottom right there are the only control body that is accredited or authorized to carry out audits in China. Apart from that, all of them carry out audits anywhere in the world. And it is based on a continuous improvement approach. So over the first 5 years of certification, the minimum score that is required by a business will increase. So that allows space for a business to sort of grow into the commitments that are required and sort of bring in additional policies and procedures and so on over that first time. So there's always a minimum criterion that has to be met, but the sort of the minimum threshold will increase over that time. And also unique to FairWild, we have something called a risk analysis that's carried out prior to the first audit. So that is a desk-based analysis that looks at various sort of risk factors associated with the harvest of that species in that location. So that might be things such as the global distribution of the species, how does the species reproduce, what plant part is intended to be harvested, and so on. And that is all put together and used to assign a low, medium, or high risk to harvest of that species. And if it comes out as high risk, that doesn't preclude certification. Certification can still happen. There's just some extra requirements placed on the business to successfully pass an audit for a high risk species. So these FairWild certified businesses are supporting a number of international agreements and targets. So for example, the FairWild standard is a recognized tool to support the delivery of the Conventional Biological Diversity's global strategy on plant conservation. There's also been various bits of work looking at how FairWild standard and certification can support implementation of CITES. So that's an international agreement on trade in endangered species. And also supporting implementation and achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. So FairWild certification helps us support achievement of 9 of the Sustainable Development Goals. So such as supporting no poverty through the minimum pricing, gender equality through having to look at the balance and treatment of workers of not just gender, but also other sort of protected characteristics, and life on land. So obviously looking at the sort of the environmental side of the standard there. And there are a number of businesses that are involved sort of in the FairWild family, as it were, at the moment. So it's not just certified collection operations, but also businesses that trade or process in the certified ingredients or incorporate them into products aimed at consumers. So these are all on the FairWild website as well, and we'll hear some more from some of these in just a moment. But just to say finally, there are a number of ingredients that are certified, and they have applications ranging from herbal supplements, food and drink applications, cosmetics, and so on. And obviously what we're looking at here today is one of those ingredients, which is licorice. So that leads us to then actually e-meeting some of these FairWild certified licorice collection operations. So first of all, we're going to hear about 2 of these certified collection operations with an introduction from Martin Bauer. So Martin Bauer are a FairWild registered trader and business, registered since 2014, and they trade in a number of FairWild certified ingredients, which includes licorice. So Andrea Romola is here from Martin Bauer. She's joining us today. She's part of the Strategic and Sustainable Procurement Services team at Martin Bauer and is an expert in wild collection and biodiversity. So she's going to tell us a bit more about Martin Bauer's sourcing of FairWild certified licorice.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. Yeah, the Martin Bauer Group is, don't know if everyone of you knows it, so I give a short explanation. It's a long-established company that is working in the herbal business. It's based in Germany, but it has branches all over the globe. And the company is providing a wide range of plant raw materials for different applications, different customers. We are specialized in herbal and fruit teas, but we also provide plant extracts, powders, and other botanicals. And well, as a company whose business is really based upon plants and plant diversity, the current biodiversity and climate crisis is, of course, a fundamental risk that we don't want to watch just help and needlessly. And so the company rather early decided to invest in the increasing sustainability of our supply chains that for quite some part is based upon wild collection activities. So, and we were also lucky that we were supported in this aim by customers that also attach importance to this kind of raw material quality. And licorice is a good example for that. As mentioned before, it's one of the traditional big products with many uses, and not only for food, but also for tobacco and so on. We heard that because of its special taste and sweetness. And so we have a high demand of that plant all over the globe. And at the same time, we know that there is some overuse of resources, namely over collection in some parts of the natural populations, which leads to restrictions. And so the species may be filed in the red lists of some countries, and there is a decline of populations, which cannot be our aim. So especially as a provider of large quantities of that of licorice, we have a large responsibility, and not only towards the nature and natural resources, but also to our towards our customers. And so we were convinced that we need a long-term strategy to deal with these challenges. And yeah, this was in fact when we first came in contact with FairWild. It was now more than 15 years ago. And well, in the meantime, we are very happy to collaborate with two big partners that are certified FairWild that I want to introduce just shortly. One of them is GeoFloweR, a company based in Georgia. It's a partner that we collaborate in a company from its beginnings about almost 15 years ago. And we didn't start with, our partnership didn't start with licorice, but with other products coming from this tiny country, but which is small, but very rich in nature and natural resources. And but also in one part of the country, in the eastern steppe areas, they have populations of European licorice growing. And so we were able to together to establish the FairWild certification in 2015. And even before that, our other partner is based in Kazakhstan, and was mentioned before by Elise, one of the partners that were visited in the course of the study. It's AZIA Gold. Yeah, here another species of licorice is sourced. For us, it's Chinese licorice. And as you can see, the picture of the sourcing looks rather similar to the one in Georgia, because it's just an example for the typical habitats of licorice, which are growing in the vast floodplains of Asia, from West Asia, like Georgia, until East Asia and China. Yeah, and this operation was, in fact, was our first FairWild certified partner, and was also one of the first operators of being certified FairWild ever. And we are very happy and proud to collaborate with this company since almost more than 15 years. And yeah, all this experience with the FAIRWILD certification was also very important for our own development of strategies towards sustainable sourcing. We could see the positive effects coming from a more structured approach and more traceability, and also the effect of the FAIRWILD premium money that could be seen in an improvement of the living conditions of the collectors. And yes, this deepened our conviction that, especially with a look in the future, that this is the right way to take over responsibility in the sourcing of plants, and a way that we want to continue.
Great, thank you so much, Andrea. Yeah, now we've had that sort of insight into how maybe these two companies came to FAIRWILD originally. I'd like to take a bit more of a closer look at those two companies. So first off is GeoFlower. So they, as Andrea said, are based in Georgia. They are certified for Glycyrrhiza glabra, which is also organic certified. They export about 200 tons a year and have been FAIRWILD certified since 2015. The contact details for GeoFlower are there. I will also circulate the contact details for all of these companies and speakers after the webinar. But first we're going to look at a short video that GeoFlower have sent.
I'm Kocha Dzneladze and I represent the company GeoFlower, which is located in country Georgia. We are having a 4,000 square metric production unit in different parts of Georgia. And our main activity of the business is collection and production of different wild fruits and herbs, and which are in most cases ingredients for the herbal or fruit infusion, or it is used for the pharmaceutical industry. As of today, company holds following certification like ISO 22000, organic certification, FAIRWILD MABA certification. A few years ago, we got like a Georgian National Business Award as an ecological clean Georgian product. On the map, you can see these collection sites, which we have approximately 25 collection sites. And a few years ago, we started as a trial to introducing communication sites, so-called communication center, which is the place for the collectors to have daily face-to-face contact with the company's people, to get some training, to get all useful information, internet access, and same time they can deliver their harvested certified products. The company does different social projects with different communities. All these social projects financed either by FAIRWILD premium amount or MABA premium fund or GeoFlower own investment.
Great, so that's GeoFlower, so they are based in Georgia. We also have AZIA Gold, so as Elise and Andrea mentioned, they are based in Kazakhstan. They are certified for a different species of licorice, so Glycyrrhiza urulensis. That is also organic certified, and they export over 100 tons a year. And they are actually one of the longest certified FAIRWILD companies, so since 2008. Sadly, they couldn't share a video to use on their webinar today. But if you have any questions, the contact information is there. So next, we're moving to a slightly different part of the world, so to Spain. And this is a company called MOLI. So they are certified for Glycyrrhiza glabra roots and rhizomes, and also prepared root sticks. They are organic certified as well, and export about 100 tons per year. And they have been FAIRWILD certified since 2013, so also one of our longest certified companies. And the contact information there is for organic herb trading. And so we're going to actually hear from organic herb trading now. So they have a FairWild registered business. They have a long history with FairWild, and they were one of the first actually to help us road test the standard with their suppliers, and then registered as a trader in 2015. And their founder, Mike Brook, was actually on the FairWild Board of Trustees for a number of years. So all of the FairWild licorice from Herbs Del Moli is sold via organic herb trading. And Eileen Clark, we're going to hear from now. She is the ethical supply chain specialist for organic herb trading with a background in fair trade. And she works on fair certifications that organic herb trading offer. So Eileen, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Emily. Hi. And I've brought you this picture of Mike, our founder, and the founder of Herbs Del Moli, or Herbs Del Moli, with him, not solely to embarrass them, although I think that might be a side effect, but to illustrate that long-standing relationship that you alluded to, Emily, that goes between the two businesses. Mike and Ismail were both establishing their businesses around the same time in the 80s, and they had similar values and were both very passionate about organic integrity in the plants that they were working with and providing the very best quality. Mike started out growing organic herbs because that came from a drive for medicinal herb availability, and Ismail was inspired by the wild collection in the area where he was working, and so they became partners early, and both those businesses remain independent now, and they're both now reaching a 40th anniversary. I realized actually that it's nearly 10 years since I first visited Herbs Del Moli. At the time, they had already excellent systems in place for protecting the wild resources that they were working with. But we then worked together, we supported them into FAIRWILD certification, and that I think has offered a clear structure for taking that further and doing more to protect the area and understand and map better and have better record keeping. We've also worked closely on the social elements of the programme. For example, holding collectors' assemblies where the whole supply chain then can sit together and everyone can have a voice in that, which has been really important. As you said, Emily, organic herb trading has been active in FairWild since its inception, really, and we choose to purchase FairWild product wherever we can in an effort to support the suppliers and to bring awareness into the marketplace as well through the sales that we make. We also work to try and support more wild collectors into the scheme to widen the range and to build resilience in the supply chains, so that we'd obviously be really happy to hear from anybody who's interested to partner with us. I think we're going over to Spain now. Thanks, Emily.
Great, thank you so much. Yes, and we have a video from Herbs Del Moli that we'd like to share with you now.
Since 1986, Herbs Del Moli has been showing the world that producing herbs and spices in a sustainable and environmentally friendly way works. In 2013, we implemented our own vision of what equitable development means by joining to FairWild Foundation to supply sustainable licorice to all over the world. In Herbs Del Moli, we firmly believe in giving back to the earth and to the brave community who wear the land for all they are granting us. In this case, licorice of the finest quality. FairWild Foundation guarantees to do it in the proper way. Licorice is a root which grows in a natural wild environment. Usually, they are disfavored areas with high unemployment and depopulation rates. It is a true challenge to maintain people's hope. Harvesting, drying, and preparing this product is a hard work. FairWild Premium allows them to get a better life. So every time you are getting FairWild licorice from Herbs Del Moli, think of the heart and soul of these people, and they'll be thinking of you with a smile in the face.
Right, and as I said, if you'd like to get in touch with any of these companies, I will circulate the information afterwards, including for Herbs Del Moli. So one more company I'd like to introduce you to now. So this is not actually a certified company at the moment, we hope. They are what we term a potential FairWild producer. So this one I'd like to mention here is called Basaran Organics. So they have a collection operation they work with in Uzbekistan. They've actually had their year one FairWild audit this year. They're just waiting for the certification decision. They offer organic certified licorice, so both EU and NOP, and produce several hundred tons of licorice per year. What we mean by a potential producer is a company that's taken some initial steps towards FairWild certification, but they haven't actually sort of got to the point of certification yet. So it might be they've had a pre-audit, it might be they have had that risk analysis I mentioned carried out. So it's a way of helping to give more visibility to companies that are interested in FairWild certification in the marketplace. We involve in what we term our matchmaking work. So that's either sort of might be including them in webinars like this, it might be mentioning them on our website, or just organically connecting them on a one-to-one basis to companies that come to us and say they're interested in a certain ingredient. And the reason for sort of doing that is that often companies are interested and they really are sort of working towards certification, but it does have a financial cost associated with it, and they want to have reassurance from potential customers or the marketplace that there will be interest in that certified material as and when they can achieve certification. So if you work with any companies that or yourself a company that might be interested in being involved as a potential producer as you sort of work towards certification, then do get in touch. Our email address is on the last slide, or you can get in touch via our website as well. So just a couple more slides and then I think we'll have a few minutes for questions. So just to explain how businesses that are at different stages in the supply chain can actually get involved in FairWild. So we've been focusing so far on the collection operations. So those are the businesses that we just showed you the videos of and heard a bit about. And they are the ones that have the FairWild audit every year and are audited against the FairWild standard. Businesses further up the supply chain, so they might be processors or traders such as Martin Bauer or Organic Herb Trading, or brand companies that are creating the products for end consumers. They instead register with the FairWild Foundation. And they are subject to trading rules and also rules on using the FairWild label, and more about that in just a moment. As I mentioned, we have this matchmaking work to connect all the companies at different stages of the supply chain, so we can help to increase the market share of FairWild ingredients for different products. And finally, there is this FairWild label I mentioned. So that is a label that brands can put on their products and use in marketing materials to demonstrate to consumers that they have used certified ingredients, and also to give them an opportunity to talk around what that actually means. So all of the things we've talked about so far, you know, the different elements of the FairWild standard in terms of the use of the premium, the ensuring that the harvest is sustainable and traceable and legal, and also carried out under fair trade principles. The label is a way that companies can talk about all of that in terms of their products. So just a couple more points just to finish this off. Hopefully this has piqued your interest in thinking more about licorice you might be using, or maybe even other ingredients. You know, this we focused on licorice today, but obviously the concepts can apply to any wild plant ingredients. So what we usually recommend is a sort of series of steps for businesses to take when they're beginning to think about this. So reviewing what the uses of licorice in your supply chain, you know, where does it come from, what sort of risks and opportunities you're already aware of, and then exploring the potential to integrate FairWild ingredients. So either purchasing from one of the certified companies that we've talked about, or helping one of the companies you already source from to undergo FairWild certification themselves. And if you would like to get in touch, we can either sort of loop you into any of those businesses, or you can discuss registration or certification for businesses in your supply chain or your business yourself. And there is lots more information on the FairWild website, so the link is there, but it's also quite an easy one to remember, hopefully, so do look on the website for more. I will also then just hand back briefly to Caitlin, who will give a short update on if you want to learn more about the Wild at Home project.
Thanks, Emily. So yeah, just really briefly, we're planning to launch the resources I mentioned. So the Wild Check platform, including that licorice profile talked a bit about, in February 2022. So we'll share some details about the launch event for that, and also when the resources are online via FAIRWILD's channels as well. So keep an eye on Traffic's social media and FAIRWILD's as well, and we'll keep everyone posted for those. We're also planning to engage with business using this thing called the We Use Wild Pledge. So yeah, do keep your eyes out and feel free to get in contact with me as well if you have any questions or interest in the project in the meantime. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Caitlin. So the very final thing it remains for me to do is just to thank so much all of our friends of FairWild. So these are businesses that have provided financial support to FairWild to help us carry on the work that we're doing, both in webinars and outreach such as this, but also more directly the sort of work with maintaining a standard and certification scheme. So thank you so much to all of them, and thank you also to the businesses that maybe don't sort of directly financially contribute in this way, but contribute through being part of the FairWild family. By using FairWild certified ingredients, by being certified themselves. We really do appreciate that. So finally, just thank you everyone so much for coming. I can see there are some chats still going on in the chat box. So if there are any questions to pick up afterwards, the FairWild email address is secretariat@fairwild.org. But I will send everyone a registered email from that address tomorrow anyway. So you will have both the recording, and also I'll share all of the contact details I mentioned there as well. So thank you so much for coming. I hope it's piqued your interest to learn more about licorice and other wild plant ingredients. And we hope to continue conversations in the future. Thank you.